She trained her entire life for this, to leave Earth behind and venture into the great unknown. A NASA astronaut, brilliant, brave, and chosen for a mission that would make history. But just hours before launch, inside the quiet of her private quarters, she made one last request, not for a speech, not for glory, not even for family. She just wanted her dog, a gentle golden retriever who had been with her through every failed test, every lonely night, every launch delay. The mission team tried to refuse. Protocols, timelines, risk, but what happened next left even the flight director speechless, and as she rose into space the next morning, she carried more than gear. She carried a message, one only her dog could understand. Like, share, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. We read every comment. She had stared at the stars for as long as she could remember, tracing phantom paths between constellations on childhood ceiling walls. The night sky was her first classroom, her first promise to herself. One day she would leave Earth. She would join the silent voyage that others only whispered about. She would be more than gravity's captive. In that determination, she built her life, from early astronaut training to grueling simulations. She pushed through rigors that broke many, but shaped few. Every sleepless test, every physical limit shattered, every failure burned into her resolve. Her peers saw a woman forged for space, disciplined, calm, focused, but beneath the visor lay a heart that had known isolation, distance, and longing. The outer world saw a hero in waiting. The inner world held one constant thread. Her dog, her golden retriever Aurora, was more than a pet. She was counsel in stillness, comfort after disillusionment, the only living creature who met her fear with calm. In late nights, when data spikes betrayed anomalies and doubt whispered into her mind, Aurora curled at her feet and reminded her she was not wholly alone. At training centers far from home, when messages from loved ones felt too distant, Aurora's greeting at her return was gravity's sweetest pull. If the cosmos ever felt cold, her dog made Earth feel warm again. And though she wore a spacesuit, commanded simulation decks, toured press rooms with practiced poise, in quiet corners she wept. She wept for the unknown, for the fracture between ambitions and memories, for all the days she had sacrificed to live among rockets and labs. She wept for Aurora, the only figure she ever truly knew without walls. Then came word of the mission, a once-in-lifetime venture. There was no precedent yet for what she would do. It promised discoveries, danger, and headlines. She was picked among hundreds for skill, temperament, mental resilience. She was to be the first female lead on this particular interstellar shuttle. Already press had whispered about her in the same breath as pioneer astronauts like Sally Ride and Valentina Tereshkova. She would carry not just instruments, but hope. Inside her mind, however, the weight of legacy crept. If she succeeded, she would be immortalized. If she failed, she would vanish into silence. The world would remember the astronaut. But who would remember the woman behind the helmet and the dog behind the woman? In the days before the final clearance, her schedule was ironclad. Medical checks, fueling rehearsals, code reviews, cabin drills. She visited the launch pad at dawn. She floated, tethered in simulation chambers. She met with mission control, engineers, media, smiling, composed. None saw her flicker. None saw the hush behind her eyes. Still, she carried Aurora's photo in a little frame in her quarters. You might see it on a shelf next to mission patches, motivational quotes, logs from prior tests. The photo, Aurora mid-leap at twilight, tongue lolling, ears flung wide, fur glowing in sunset gold. The collar glinted, and around her neck rested Aurora's favorite chewed tennis ball. That ball, yellowed and frayed, had traveled in suit bags, labs, dorm rooms. She touched it nightly, tracing the rough edges with her fingertip before sleep. Few knew Aurora's name. Few knew the hours she would slip away from briefings just to video call the dog, watching her tilt her head, tail wagging in slow swoops. Few knew she had once stayed awake through the night just to wait for a bark against the door after a late simulation. In those private hours she whispered into the phone, "Can you wait a little more? I promise I'll come home to you," Aurora would bark. She would wait, tonight, The night before launch, she packed her mission bag. She packed medical medkits, emergency protocols, mission manifests, tether lines. She stuck in the photo and folded the tennis ball into a cloth pouch. She paused over it, fingers lingering. She inhaled, tasting the faint mint of cloth and memory. She placed it beside her flight patch and turned off the lights. She stood in darkness, breathing in the hush. A light slipped under the doorway. The corridor dimly glowed. She exhaled. She was ready. She believed she was ready. But she felt the crack inside her heart. She felt the distance stretching between her and Aurora. She held herself taut. If she fell, if she soared, the first thing she would have wished was to see her dog. The next morning, the corridors would be humming. Engineers, cameras, security, the countdown already in motion. But for now, in the quiet, she held on to Aurora in memory and in the frame by her bedside. She whispered her name in the darkness, as though sending a prayer through steel walls, through airlocks, past Earth's cradle, straight into the space she would soon cross. And in that silence, she wondered, would the world understand? Would the mission controls see not only the astronaut, but the human whose last tether to Earth was fur and warm eyes? Could she hold both dreams and grief in the same breath? She tucked in, turned off the light, mind full of vectors, protocols, engine thrusts, and of Aurora. The sky outside her windows was still Earth's dusk. Tomorrow it would open to stars. She closed her eyes. Launch day. T-minus 8 hours. The facility was alive with precision. Teams moved like synchronized gears, voices crisp in comms, boots sharp on polished floors. At the center of it all, she stood suited and sealed, her nameplate catching the fluorescent glare as she passed final security. But something was wrong. To everyone else, she looked flawless, hair tightly braided, chin high, the posture of someone carved from mission discipline. But inside, something trembled. Not fear, not doubt. It was something more fragile, more human, the kind of ache that numbers couldn't solve and training couldn't mute. As she entered her private holding room, the final checkpoint before suiting. Up and entering the launch corridor, she paused at the small bench near the window. On it sat a box. Inside were final personal effects, cleared and approved, toothbrush, comb, small medallion from her father, a folded letter she hadn't opened, and nestled beneath, the worn yellow tennis ball. She stared at it. Her fingers hovered over it like she was afraid it might disappear. Then, without breaking eye contact from the ball, she made a call on the secure line. "Is there any chance," she said quietly, "that I could see Aurora?" The silence on the other end wasn't technical. It was disbelief. "Say again, Commander?" "My dog," she replied, firmer now. "Aurora. She's in Houston with the trainer. She's family. I'd like to see her before launch." "Commander," came the voice, measured and calm. "You know the rules. Clearance, contamination, timing. I know every protocol. I wrote the contamination memo. This is not about the mission. This is personal." A pause. Then static. Then a new voice. "Flight Director Rivera. You've got 6 hours to launch, Commander. This isn't standard. We can't risk exposure to the capsule environment. She doesn't need to come to the launch pad. Just the holding bay hallway. I won't touch her. I just need her to see me. I need her to know I'm okay. Is this an emergency?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Just not the kind you have protocols for." There was a longer silence now. Then the line cut off. She sat down, her gloved hands folded over her knees. Her heart thudded, not with fear, but with urgency. How do you explain to a room full of engineers that your soul needs to say goodbye? That the oxygen mask and the re-entry heat shield weren't the things keeping you grounded? Your dog was. 10 minutes passed. No word. She stood up, paced. Every second ticked like a countdown of its own. This wasn't about breaking rules. It was about something greater than protocol, the unspoken grief of parting without closure. She walked to the edge of the window. Below, the gantry tower loomed, painted in soft dawn light. The earth felt smaller than it had ever been. Her eyes drifted to the clouds, cotton thin, rolling slowly. She wondered if Aurora was looking up at the same sky, sniffing the air, waiting. Then the door opened. A security officer stepped inside, holding a digital pad. "Commander, there's a request on file from you marked emotional health accommodation. It's been escalated." "And?" You have 10 minutes, but she has to stay behind the quarantine line. She'll be in the corridor glass." She didn't speak. She just nodded once, then sat down hard, as though her knees gave out for a second. 5 minutes later, the glass panel separating the launch corridor from the visitor tunnel fogged slightly, and then cleared. Aurora appeared. She was older now, a little slower, muzzle graying, but the moment her eyes locked onto the astronaut's figure behind the glass, her tail began to move in wide, sweeping arcs. The astronaut stepped forward slowly, hands to the glass, helmet still unsealed at her side. Aurora barked once, then sat, tilted her head, and let out the softest whine. Not panic, not sadness. Recognition, a hello and a goodbye. The astronaut's lips trembled. Her eyes welled. She raised one gloved hand to the glass. Aurora lifted her paw. Behind her, 2 launch technicians watched from a distance, still as statues. And then, in a motion so quiet it might have been missed by cameras, the astronaut pressed the chewed tennis ball to the glass. Aurora leaned in and nudged it gently, her nose fogging the pain. For that one moment, the Earth held its breath. The astronaut whispered so quietly even the room couldn't hear it. "You always knew where I was going. But I need you to know why." Then she stepped back, composed herself, sealed her helmet. Aurora barked once more, then sat completely still, watching as though she understood she would not see her again. The security officer approached. "Time's up." The astronaut nodded but didn't speak. The image of Aurora burned behind her eyes. She turned to leave the room, walking with the stillness of someone carrying both grief and peace. As the door closed behind her, Aurora whined again, and that was when it happened. Something so bizarre it would be reviewed on surveillance for weeks. Aurora placed her paw exactly where the astronaut's hand had been and refused to move. The launch sequence was set T-minus 4 hours inside. NASA's high-security prep zone. Tension buzzed like static electricity. Final systems were being cross-checked. Fueling timelines were green. Every minute counted. But deep inside the crew-ready facility, something was off. A delay that hadn't hit the official logs yet, but had already reached the ears of those who knew her best. She wasn't boarding. Her suit was sealed, her gear packed, her biometric vitals steady. But she stood still in the pre-launch chamber, helmet under one arm, boots locked to the ground. Technicians waited. Coordinators tapped screens. Voices whispered down the chain of command. Flight Director Rivera's voice cracked through her comms. "Commander, we need movement." "Confirm transport readiness." No reply. "Commander?" She pressed the comm button with calm precision. "I won't board until I confirm Aurora's status." Dead silence. "Commander, you had your accommodation. You saw her. This is not part of the mission timeline. I need to know where she is now. After I left that room, I need to know she's okay. This is not a rescue op. It is to me." Behind the one-way glass, Rivera rubbed his forehead and swore under his breath. "Get me legal, get me psych, get me public affairs, now." Because what no one had expected, not the engineers, not the media, not even her backup pilot, was that the woman they trusted to handle the pressure of space would draw a line not for her safety, but for her dog. In the corridor just yards away, a handler attempted to escort Aurora out of the facility. She wouldn't budge. She planted herself near the exit of the viewing glass hallway and simply refused. Not barking, not pacing, just sitting, eyes locked in the direction her owner had gone. Tail still. Breath slow, no treats worked. No commands registered. It was like she was rooted to something invisible. "She's still in the building," the astronaut said flatly. "She knows something's wrong, that I haven't said goodbye." Flight Command tried again. "Commander, this is bigger than you. The world is watching. You walk now. We delay a launch that's cost $2.3 billion. We risk payload integrity, orbital alignment, global visibility. But she cut in. Then let the world see what loyalty looks like." Silence again. Security whispered among themselves. Someone from the psych team suggested stress. But one intern, quietly monitoring the hallway cams, hit record. They had seen Aurora press her paw to the glass. They had seen her wait. They saw now that the story unfolding wasn't about science or hardware or legacy. It was about love and defiance. 30 minutes passed. Social media began buzzing. A technician's cousin leaked the hallway footage. It hit Reddit first, then TikTok, then Instagram. The image of a golden retriever seated stoically near the NASA logo, refusing to leave, had the caption, "Her astronaut hasn't said goodbye yet." Within 15 minutes, it was trending globally. Back inside, the astronaut remained calm, standing tall in her gear, surrounded by mission control silence. Finally, the door opened. It wasn't Rivera. It was an old woman with silver hair and steady eyes, the head of the Flight Ethics Board. She entered slowly, like she'd seen everything before and nothing quite like this. She approached the astronaut quietly. "You've earned this launch," she said. "Don't throw it away. I'm not. I'm honoring it. But I won't carry this silence with me into space. If I go whole." The old woman looked her in the eyes for a long moment, then spoke softly. "What would change if you saw her again?" "Nothing," the astronaut replied. "Except everything," the woman nodded, then turned to the technician outside and gave a simple order. "Bring her in." 10 minutes later, Aurora was brought to the far end of the pressurized corridor. Leash clipped but loose, eyes wide, tail twitching, the astronaut approached, slowly, keeping protocol in mind. She didn't touch her, but she knelt down, eye to eye, and looked into Aurora like she was looking into the soul of Earth itself. "You waited," she whispered. "You always wait." Aurora leaned forward, nose brushing the edge of the boot. No bark, no whimper, just stillness. Absolute trust. The astronaut reached into her flight pack, pulled out a single patch, the mission insignia, and gently placed it into a container the handler held. "Put that in her crate," she said. "Let her know I took her with me." As she stood and backed away, Aurora gave one final low bark, deep, resonant, the kind of sound dogs make when they feel something ending or beginning. The astronaut nodded once. "I'm ready now." And with that, she turned and walked toward the shuttle bay, boots thudding against the metal floor, steady, resolute, carrying a goodbye that had been earned, not given. Behind her, Aurora finally turned too and walked away on her own. The launch was perfect. From the moment ignition flared and the tower cleared, the world was watching, not just the ascent of a shuttle, but the journey of a woman who had carried more than science into space. She had carried love, memory, a dog's paw print pressed invisibly against her chest. The mission was to deploy and test a new satellite system, one that would orbit Earth for decades. But to her, it meant something else. Each orbit was a breath, a heartbeat, a reminder that even in silence, connection echoes. Up there, in the weightless calm of low Earth orbit, she floated inside the capsule, tethered not just by safety lines, but by the invisible thread that had followed her from the launch pad to the stars. In the small personal storage module, tucked beside utility kits and radiation badges, lay the tennis ball, wrapped in cloth. Still worn and soft, she had brought it not for superstition, not even for comfort, but because it was the one thing that made her cabin feel like Earth. On the 5th day of orbit, after the mission checklist had been completed and communication windows were closing, she made a private request. "Can I record a personal log?" She asked Mission Control. "Go ahead, Commander." "Channel is yours." She turned on the cam. Her face appeared, helmet off, short hair floating around her like a halo, eyes puffy from the dehydration of space. But her voice was clear. "To whoever watches this, press, family, strangers, I know what this all looks like. A woman who paused a billion-dollar mission to see her dog. Some will call it weakness. Some will say I risked everything for sentiment. Let them." She held up the tennis ball. "This," she said softly, "is what grounded me. Not gravity. Not rules. Her." She paused, eyes wet. "I've been asked what legacy I hope to leave. And the truth is, I don't care if they remember my name. I care that someone out there watches this and says, 'She loved well.' That's enough." The video ended. Unbeknownst to her, the engineer monitoring the comms clipped that message. He uploaded it, privately at first, under the title, "Commander's Final Log, the message she left for her dog." It went viral within hours. Millions watched as the astronaut, floating among stars, spoke not of conquest or technology, but of connection, of Aurora, of what it meant to carry Earth in your heart while you touched the cosmos. But that wasn't the end. Back home in Houston, something strange happened. Aurora, now under the care of the astronaut's closest friend, had been calm since launch. She barely barked, slept more than usual. But on the morning of day 7, she stirred suddenly, ears alert, tail raised. She ran to the edge of the property and looked up, whining. It was exactly 4:17 a.m. at that same moment. The satellite she helped deploy, equipped with an experimental low-band frequency emitter, passed directly overhead. The engineer, now obsessed with the emotional fallout of the mission, had coded a hidden signal into the satellite's first test ping. It was a sound wave, nothing complex, just a simple frequency, but when translated through the right software, it formed one word: Aurora. The dog froze. She looked to the sky, and then, without cue, without command, she barked once. Loud, clear, then sat down and stared upward, her head tilted exactly like she had in the hallway on launch day. The moment was caught on home security footage and later reviewed by multiple news networks. The timestamp, the satellite path, the precise alignment, it all matched. It became known as the bark heard from space. NASA never officially confirmed the signal's content. The engineer was never disciplined, but quietly reassigned. But for the millions who watched that video, it didn't matter. It wasn't about proof. It was about belief that somewhere across miles of vacuum and silence, a woman had sent her final message, not to a nation or a network or a legacy, but to her dog. If this story moved you, honor it the way she would have wanted. Hug your dog. Tell them they're your home. Like, share, and subscribe. And drop your location in the comments. We read every single one.